What's up, everyone? I hope you're doing well today. This is Raphael Garcia here on Tuesday, August 4th, and I'm back with Schwan Humes. Schwan, want to let everybody know how you're doing?
Not bad at all. I was trying to find. Ever since this thing started, I was supposed to start grappling again. But then after the whole pandemic thing started, just threw all my plans out the window. So I'm kind of having the urge to kind of get back in, get some grappling, get some kickboxing in. But I don't know when that's gonna happen.
Where are you, in Texas?
Yeah, I used to show
Oh,
up at open max. I got my kids cost too much. People are like, why don't you join? I'm like, I don't have an extra or whatever it takes to go to these classes regularly.
I mean, yeah,
So,
that's
but I
right.
used to keep dropping the open mats or find people who grapple and kind of meet up. But it's been difficult in between moving and everything else going on.
Are gyms open down there?
I've heard some of them are. I've heard some of them, but I don't know anybody personally who goes to any that are open.
Okay. Well, you'll find one, and when you do, let me know. I'll probably be down that place soon one day to beat you up. Um,
You would be able to grapple me. I'm more of a I'm more of a functional grappler. I've like somebody who spent a lot of time rolling, so it's like you're just real comfortable, but you're not super technical. That would best describe me. But it's just
mm,
fun. It's just a fun thing to do. It's super fun to do.
I got you. I got you on that, man. So let's go ahead and jump into tonight's show and talk about a couple of different topics. Right out the gate, let's move over to Bellator, or excuse me, not Bellator. Goodness, I'm all over the place tonight. Let's start with the action from this past weekend at UFC Fight Night 173, where Derek Brunson picked up a big win over Evan Shabazian, stopping him 26 seconds into the third round. So, Swan, let's talk about this. With Derek Brunson, we both previewed this fight expecting the Brunson of old to show up and see him lose this fight, but he showed us a lot of different things on Saturday. Was this win more about him evolving or Shabazian still being too much of a prospect?
I don't really know that it was him evolving. Like a lot of people think because I'm pointing out facts about Derek Brunson that I don't respect what he does or I don't think he's a good fighter. It's not that I don't think he's a good fighter. It's that when it's come to a certain level of opposition, he's consistently found a way to lose. Except maybe a win over a Theta Leota Machida. When he's gotten to a certain caliber opponent, he's never found a way to get past that guy. That's just I hate to be the guy who has to bring that up, but it's just a fact. The biggest shock that I had on that night was Derek Brunson kind of went to the wrestling a little bit earlier than I thought he would, and usually he just gets in these firefights and often is on the bad end of it. And if you really watch the fight early on, Edmund was putting it to him, and even when he was finishing him or he's landing on the feet, he's still putting his chin up. He's still kind of wide open. He's still kind of leaning into shots. I'm not saying he can't be effective. He's a great athlete. He's super strong. He's super physical. It's just generally he gets into these firefights where he has a lot of defensive lapses that ends up getting him punished. When he puts the wrestling in, he can be a dangerous fighter. It adds another element that opens up his striking. It also makes up for some of the defensive missteps he makes because he always has that takedown in the back of his pocket. So I wasn't necessarily surprised that he attempted this. The surprise was more like this didn't tell me much about Derek Brunson. Derek Brunson hits hard. He's super physical. He can wrestle. I already knew that. The question was going to be what happened when Edmund was put in a position that he didn't want to be in, when he couldn't completely control where the fight took place and the pace of the fight. And it just so turned out that when that happened, he really didn't have any answers, like nothing that he could sustain when when Brunson started mixing it up on him. So it told me a lot about Edmund. It didn't really tell me anything different about Derek. Like I said the week before, if Edmund beats him, that means he's in that elite class. If Edmund loses, it just proves that he's a prospect who needs more seasoning. And Derek beating a prospect that needs more seasoning, he's done that before. The question is, the question I still have to ask is, can he beat an elite guy? Elite guy in the division, can Derek Brunson beat him? Because he has not shown that yet, and he still hasn't. Maybe Edmonds a Shabazian's an elite talent, but clearly he's not an elite guy as of yet.
So, looking at this win for Brunson here, is this a big moment for him? I don't expect to see him to move too much in the rankings, but what are your thoughts about that?
I don't think it's a big move for him, to be quite honest. Um, Shavazian had shown some talent. He'd shown some skills, some athleticism. I don't know that anybody had bought into him. I mean, they said he had the potential to be a title challenger. He still has that potential. He showed that talent, but he wasn't truly established in the middleweight division. So beating him kind of just reminds people that Derek Brunson is a force, and not just anybody can beat him. But it still doesn't prove that Derek Brunson's an elite middleweight, because all the guys who were considered elite have beaten him. Adesanya, Whitaker, Yoel Romero, Anderson Silva isn't considered elite, and he's also got a win over him. So I don't think it changes anything for him. For people who just thought he couldn't fight and he was going to be a stepping stone, it might change their perception of him. But for anybody who kind of knows Derek Brunson, like I said, he didn't show us anything he hadn't shown us before. He might have shown a little bit more veteran experience and playing a smarter fight game. But outside of that, we've seen Derek Brunson wrestle before. We always ask why he doesn't do it more. We've seen Derek Brunson knock people out. We always wonder why he hasn't done it more. So he didn't show anything different. He didn't submit him, and early in the fight, he was getting it taken to him on the feet. So it was kind of going the way a Derek Brunson fight against an elite talent usually goes. So I think he's just in a holding pattern. We still have to see him beat an elite guy. If he wants to move in division, he's going to have to beat somebody of an elite caliber. And until he does, he's going to be pretty much where he's always been, a dangerous fighter, but a guy who's always been a step or two below elite levels in the division.
And what about Shabazian here? Are we looking at his ceiling, or should we be talking about something else?
I think Shabazian, Shabazian, we all know, is coached by Edmund Taradian. They say it. Ronda's ex-coach, and so
Edmund Tarvinian.
Yeah, we got to see the best and the worst of it. Shabazian's athletic. He hits hard. He's not necessarily a terrible defensive wrestler. He's got some grappling skills, but what it seems like is he's a guy who has to have control of a fight for him to win. Like, you can push him, you can make it tough, but if he doesn't have a certain amount of control in the fight, some of those defensive lapses start showing up. Maybe a lack of conditioning shows up, and his coach, who hasn't been known to be good in stressful situations or chaotic situations, kind of once again got exposed for that, because once the fight started going against Shabazian, he didn't really seem to have any answers. He didn't really seem to be calm. He didn't really seem to be able to protect his fighter or give his fighter any directions that would allow him to regain control of the fight once he lost it. So Shabazian, I still think he's the goods. I still think he has talent. I just think he needs a little bit more seasoning, and he might need to maybe work on his conditioning in regards to transitioning between striking and grappling, because wrestling. Because if you haven't really worked at it, I don't mean worked it from you're taking somebody down and you're imposing your will on them, but taking it from the point of you're getting taken down, you're getting beat up, you're getting pushed back. It's a different sort of cardio. Everybody's in good shape when they're dictating. The question is how good a shape you are when somebody else is dictating you. And I don't know that he's consistently working with guys who are putting him in bad spots and really bullying him, because as soon as he started having to work in certain positions, in certain spots, it seemed like he was gassing. It seemed like he didn't know what to do. It seemed like he was he'd make one wrong move and he'd compound it with another one. And I don't know if it's just a matter of Brunson hits that hard or he was caught off guard by how bloody Brunson was, but he just didn't seem to have any sort of way to slow the fight or to regain control halfway through that second round. And that's concerning. But given his coach's tendencies, that's fairly predictable, to be quite honest. So I think Edmund still has a high ceiling. I just think he needs some work in very specific areas, namely his conditioning when he's forced to be in a physical kind of high contact wrestling type battle. He hasn't really been tested in that area, and he truly got tested it tonight or last night or Saturday night, and he was found to be lacking in that area. I think that was it. He just didn't have enough grappling or enough wrestling to do anything once the wrestling started being asserted on him.
Do you think he needs to leave this team?
I don't necessarily know. I don't know that he needs to leave his team. Well, it's like I wrote an article about Edmund when he was working with Ronda. There's a lot of good things he brings to the table. A lot of people won't give him any credit, but there's a lot of good things he brings to the table. His fighters believe in him. He can work on their transitional striking. He's very good at setting up a system of fighting that allows it highlights his athlete's strengths and kind of minimizes their weaknesses. But the problem he's had as a coach historically is he doesn't have a lot of poise. He doesn't seem to have a lot of flexibility in how he teaches and what he teaches, and he doesn't seem to know how to address weaknesses. He knows how to mask them. He knows how to kind of help you navigate them, but he doesn't know how to address them. And with that kind of weakness, seemingly, he's going to have to address it. You can only get, it's like a striker who can knock everybody out. He just has takedown defense. Well, at some point, someone's going to take you down and keep you down. You need to learn how to wrestle better, or you need to learn how to grapple, preferably both. There's only going to be so many times where you defend and knock somebody out. At some point, someone's going to get you to the ground, and when they do, that hole's going to be exposed. And I don't know that Edmund has the skill set, and I don't know if Edmund is willing to let somebody else come in and kind of mix in and call the shots so that he can take those steps forward. I mean, as good as Ronda Rousey's been, she hadn't shown much off her bat with the few times she was on it. And I just don't know. I feel like he has the resources. I just don't know that Edmund is going to let Shabazian kind of take the time off to rebuild himself and retool himself. I don't know if that's the plan they have for him. If they think he's going to be a big star, they might want him back in the cage as soon as possible. And I don't think that's the answer. I think he needs at least 6 to 9 months off to really work on his craft and address some holes, and then come back in and rebuild his confidence and rebuild his momentum. But I don't think that's what's going to be done. I think they're going to push him right back in, and he might go from a unbeaten prospect to a guy on a 2-fight losing streak real quick. I mean, were you shocked by how the wrestling changed the fight? I mean, as a person with an extensive grappling background, you assume most fighters have to address this. You have to be aware of this because it's almost impossible just to stay on your feet for the entirety of every single fight you're going to be in.
So the thing is, fights like this open up a game plan on how to beat Shabazian, which everyone is aware of now. Yes, he can go out there and strike with the best, but MMA contests are not just striking fights. So now you're looking at someone like maybe a Kelvin Gastelum, who's like, I can take this guy down, and as long as I can weather the striking, I'll be okay. Hell, he weathered striking against Adesanya, so he should be able to go out there and do the same thing against Shabazian. And he may not be a massive name, but he's enough of a name that someone like a Gastelum may want to bounce back against. He's ranked number 10 right now in the weight class, so he might be concerned about that in the way people will plan on fighting him in the future.
Yeah, you know what? Now that you mentioned that, if I'm Kelvin and I have the chin I have and my cardio is still there, basically, that might be a fight. When I see a guy who gets taken down that easily and tires that fast, once you bring wrestling into it, that might be a fight I'm looking for. Maybe if Chris Weidman wins his next fight, he might be looking to put a 2-fight streak together, and he's like, if I can just get my hands on this guy, then I can beat him. I mean, I won't say he looked bad. He just looked unprepared, and he didn't seem conditioned at all for that aspect. And I don't understand how you're so unprepared for something that's almost a guarantee to happen. I mean, how many fighters actually go through 4, 5, 6 fights without having some kind of extensive grappling exchange? Like, you have to be prepared. You have to be addressing that before it comes. And Edmund did not do that, in my opinion. He didn't address it. He didn't address it from the position of you being taken down and you being forced to work. Now, he might have worked wrestling, but I think they worked it from the position of him being in control. And the minute he wasn't, he got tired real quick. And you wonder how that happens with a professional fighter who should, for all intents and purposes, be prepared not just to be the hammer, but to be the nail. Like, you can't assume you're going to dictate and control range for the entirety of a fight versus everybody you fight. I mean, that's just irresponsible coaching, in my opinion.
So let's talk about another, I guess, important win or loss, because you have Joanne Calderwood, who had a title shot in her hands, let it fall right through when she takes a fight against Jennifer Maia and goes out there and gets submitted in the first round. Let's talk about Calderwood here, because how much did she lose in this fight now that she's completely out of the title picture?
Given the division, I could see her getting back to a title fight, maybe in a fight or two. But the thing about it was, in her win streak, she hadn't really beaten anybody of note. If you really look close to it, it wasn't like she was just beating, like the highest end people in division. If I recall correctly, I think Ariana Lipski. Wait, no, yeah, I think it was Lipski she beat, and who else? Let me check real quick. It was like a win streak that it was a win streak, but it wasn't one that really kind of said you. Oh, she beat Andrea Lee, she beat Ariana Lipski and Kalindra Faria. Not exactly a murderer's row, and she lost to Caitlin Chukagian. So, I mean, that win streak wasn't the greatest win streak, and even though she won 3 out of her last 4, it wasn't really top competition. It wasn't really girls who presented matchup problems for her. So, while I feel that she can get right back in the title picture, you never know what's going to happen. And at her age and given her fighting style and the limitations she has as a fighter, at this point, every fight starts to become dangerous. As the division starts to fill up more and there becomes less of a gap between people, every fight becomes dangerous. And I feel like she pretty much gave away a title fight for a fight. If I was her manager and I'm her coach, I wouldn't have her taken. It was just a bad matchup. And now she's got to wait at least 6 to 8 months before she gets into another fight. And I don't know. I just think it was a bad move on her part. And unfortunately, I wrote an article about her probably like a couple years ago. And the sad thing about it is almost all the things I mentioned in that article are still true as of now. She's not great at the pocket. She's not a fast starter. She depends heavily on her physical strength and her size to get clinches, to get takedowns. And she depends on long-range strikes to slow opponents down because she can't handle fighting at mid-range. And if you watch that fight carefully, she shot for a takedown because Jennifer Maia was lighting her up on the feet. Every time she kept trying to push kick her and snap kick her and keep her away, but she kept on ending up in the pocket, and Maia was just having her way with her. She knew that she couldn't stay in extended exchanges, so then she forced the takedown. But from that point on, it's like she was just a half step slow, or she didn't know what to do, and she got submitted. I mean, that's just me looking at it from the overall picture. When you're watching it as an extensive grappler, I mean, did you just feel like she was a step behind or she was outclassed? Because it seemed like she didn't know what to do to get to improve position or to defend a submission. It seemed like she fell right into it.
She was definitely outclassed on the mat. It looked as if she was not ready for the positional battle. Because as soon as you see, like, it was clear as day that Maya was going for the armbar. Clear as day. And when you're fighting someone that has long limbs like that, especially long arms, armbar is the way to go. And Kyle Dewitt had zero defense at any point in time. And it was just a matter of moments before she was tapping out. And even when there was a moment where right before she rolled over that she could have still tried to defend using what is kind of called like it's called like a hand and elbow trick, but not really a trick, but it's a simple defense that you can really get out of there. But she was not even going for that position, and she was really outclassed the second this fight hit the ground. I was kind of surprised though that Maya was piecing her up on her feet. That really
I
caught
was
me off guard.
I was not surprised at all because Calder was terrible in boxing range. She's great if she can leg kick you and front kick you and push kick you. She's great in the clinch, but the thing about it is, much like Khabib Nurmagomedov, her entries into the clinch are trash. I mean, they're straight garbage, and they haven't gotten any better. And she's a slow starter. She has this physical presence that allows her to kind of move girls around because girls are trying to stay away from her, and she uses that long range weapon to kind of work her way in. But Maya's big for the division. Maya's physically strong and durable. She can't bully her. She can't just push her off and walk her down. So every time she started stepping into the clinch, she's getting hit with a combination. And she's not. And there's been multiple fights where she's been rocked early. Courtney Casey did it to her. She had to take her down. I want to say an Asian fighter. I can't remember who she is. Landed early. She ended up taking her down and wrestling her. There's been multiple fights in Joanna Calderwood's been in where she's gotten lit up in punching and boxing range and had to resort to takedowns. I felt that was going to happen. I mean, Maya's not a super busy fighter, but when you have a slow, big fighter who's got poor defense and starts slow, you can't help but look good against them. I expected her to land on the feet. I just thought JoJo Calderwood would have enough training and common sense to not force the takedown. I had no idea why she was forcing that takedown. I would have forced the clinch before I forced the takedown, because at least in the clinch you can control her, use the elbows and the knees. But she went for a takedown, and I was like, I just didn't understand. That was like a bad strategic mistake, and I don't know if that's what her corner taught her, or she just panicked because she was getting lit up and she went back to old habits. But I mean, she threw away a title fight because of it, and to me, I would think this hurts her ranking because it wasn't even a competitive fight. She didn't win on the feet. She looked awful on the ground. She just looked like she didn't even look like she belonged in the same cage as Jennifer Maia. So it was just bad all around, and I can't say I was shocked at all. I was talking about this all week leading up to the fight. I'm like, this is going to go really bad for her. I thought Maia might have a chance of knocking her out, but Calderwood wasn't going to take that risk. It just was a really bad look for her. Just really bad coach, really bad preparation, really bad fight.
How do you think Maia fares against the current champion, Valentina Shivchenko?
I think similar to Calderwood, I feel like she has some opportunity because she is big, she's physically strong, and she's not afraid of exchanges. Now, I don't know that she can beat Shevchenko in exchanges. I don't know that she wins extended exchanges, but unlike Liz Carmouche, she's not afraid to walk through some fire. And unlike Jessica Eye, she actually has legitimate boxing skills she can rely on. And unlike Caitlin Chukagian, she has physical strength. She's not just going to get ragdolled. She's just not going to get pushed around and pushed back. Valentina might beat her, but Valentina most likely is going to have to just out-quick her and knock her out. Because if you let Maia get some momentum going, there's a good chance she could wear on her. There's a good chance she could lean on her. There's a good chance that she could get some good work in through the rounds. My question is the level of athleticism. My question is the pace of the fight. Can Maia handle that pace? And once again, my question is, when Maia's used to bullying people, Shevchenko might not be able to bully Maia, but Maia's not going to be able to bully her either. This is the same girl who had 2 fights with Amanda Nunes. So Maia's not just going to truck her and throw her down and submit her and walk through her the same way she did Jojo Calder when she's done other fighters. So does she have a chance based on her physical tools and her willingness to expose herself to risk? Yes. Does she have a good chance? Athleticism, experience, level of striking says no.
Yeah, I'm kind of worried for anyone who gets placed against Shevchenko in the near future, but we'll see how that plays out for them. So we have what else? Did anything else on the card stand out to you before we move on?
I watched there were 2 fights real quick. The Vicente Luque Randy Brown fight. I like Randy Brown, but I felt like he was a step and a half below Luque, and this was pretty much a showcase fight for Luque. Brown didn't have the athleticism, the power, or the striking, or the transitional skills to do anything. He just basically got beat up and finished, and it was a bad look for him, and it was bad matchmaking on the part of his team. They should have looked at that match and said, our guy's not on that level yet. He doesn't have enough tools to create the spots he needs to, and he's not physically durable to force the spots he needs to without the tools. So I thought that was bad matchmaking on his part. Great fight for Vicente. It made him look like a beast and a killer. And once again, he's got more momentum moving back into the welterweight division in the topic of conversation as far as being a contender. The Bobby Green Lando Venata fight was a good fight. Bobby Green won, so Bobby Green's on a 2-fight winning streak. It seems like he's kind of figured out how to balance his offense and defense. Before, he would just get out work because he liked to slip and roll and parry and talk to you and throw up his hands and shoulder and give you a little shimmy and dance. And it was cool. I liked it because I like defensive fighters who pot shot. But he would get outworked by guys he was clearly outclassing technically. So he seems to have found that balance. But the person I really want to talk about is Lando Venata, who came in initially into UFC to fight Tony Ferguson on short notice and almost beat him. And ever since then, he just never seemed to live up to the expectations the UFC had of him. He's been an action fighter, but he's been an example of what happens when you have an athlete with dynamic skills and you have a coaching staff that relies more on his physical skills and his durability than actually teaching him the finer points of the game. Because he's very durable, he's still athletic, he hits hard, but he doesn't have any defense, he doesn't have any strategical awareness, he doesn't have any way to put together strikes responsibly that don't expose him to be punished by his opponent. And because of that lack of development, I feel like he's going to have his career's fallen off greatly. He was thought of as the future star. Now he's considered a journeyman, and he's losing fights in a manner that I feel is going to affect his quality of life 2, 3, 4 years from now. And it's all because he wasn't coached how to defend himself. And when you have a fighter, defending yourself doesn't mean win. Defending yourself means, can you intelligently defend yourself, i.e., not take unnecessary punishment. And this dude has not found a punch, knee, kick, elbow he's been afraid to take, and that's a problem. That's on his coaching staff. Because if I had a fighter like that and they're refusing to even address their defense at any level, I'm not going to have you representing me. Not because it makes me look bad, because I feel personally responsible for whatever happens to you 2 or 3 years down the line, because I didn't teach you enough of how to navigate deep damage to where you can function like a healthy person. A war every other time, every 3 fights, that's one thing. But a war for a guy who's not a big hitter, who's not a great finisher, and like almost every fight has been a fight of the night type fight, that's the kind of stuff that ruins people. And he doesn't make enough money to be ruined like that for the rest of his life. Just my opinion.
So what was interesting in that situation, or in the Bobby Green Lando Venado fight, was, for me, I always forget all about Bobby Green. Always forget that he's still on the roster. I always forget like his skill set, because he's another one of those guys who I think could have been so much more, but something kept him from that slot. I don't know if it was the bad decisions he was a part of, some of those split decision losses he took, but he has not, I don't want to say lived up to what we thought he would be, but his positioning as a UFC lightweight has never excelled in the way I thought it would. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, he even took some time off for a while because he was so disillusioned with how he was losing decisions. And while I can always say he was competitive in his fight, I stand by the fact that I said he has the same issue that Jorge Masvidal does. If he doesn't feel like he's getting his ass whipped, he doesn't feel like he's losing. And these guys are throwing 4 strikes for every one he's throwing. And yeah, they're not hitting you clean. And yeah, they're not really damaging you. But the fact of the matter is, when I see it, if you watch a fight and you're a judge and you see a guy throwing 4 punches to every one that guy's throwing, if the other guy's not getting hit, you wonder why isn't he ramping up his volume? So it looks like the other guy's taking control because the work rate he's doing is far overshadowing the work rate the other fighter's doing. And if you're throwing 1 or 2 strikes at a time, then those better be super damaging strikes. And while Green would land clean, he wasn't doing a huge amount of damage. And a lot of times he wouldn't even use his wrestling, which is another element that assisted in him losing close fights. I won't say he deserved to lose all those close fights, but I will say he didn't do himself any favors by constantly playing to the crowd and sticking his tongue out and flashing his teeth and just showing that you're not touching me, because the other not touching you, but you're not offering anything definitively better. So you're basically getting outworked. It seems like even though he complained about it, he's addressed it because he had a little bit more balance in what he was doing in that fight, in my opinion. And if he can find that balance, I feel like he can go on a run at 55. The problem was he would never be consistent. He'd be an exciting fight, but sometimes he'd win a close decision, sometimes he'd lose a close decision. He could never get the momentum necessary to break into the elite caliber. I don't know that he can do it now, but if he can put 2 or 3 fights together, the division isn't in a little bit of flux, and there's enough guys out there who are vulnerable enough with names who can help him take the next step. Tony Ferguson at this point would be a good fight for him. Dan Hooker at this point would be a good fight for him. Guys with names who have just the right style and maybe just the right weaknesses to kind of get him in the talks with other named fighters, because he's got to be the name for him to get bigger names like Poirier and whoever else is there. But I feel he has the opportunity. I feel he has the opponents available and the opportunity necessary to make that next step if he can find the balance between offense and defense.
All right, there, sir. Let's move on to some upcoming action. What do you want to start with first? Want to go Bellator or UFC?
We can do Bellator. I mean, might as well. I don't know that anybody else is talking about it, so I guess we should.
Well, there's only one fight I want to talk about: Michael Chandler versus Benson Henderson. This is a rematch. This is a big fight to me. I'm looking forward to it. I like when these 2 guys scrap, because they literally scrap the whole time. So they're not fighting for the title. I think it's still a 5-round fight here. Do you think this fight is going to go any different than the first one did?
I think it'll go different. And it's like I know the Pitbull brothers, and I know their management, before he fought Chandler again, I told him, I was like, Chandler is still athletic. He's not the athlete he used to be, and because he knows his chin isn't where it used to be, now he fights a little bit more carefully. But he's not really a defensively sound fighter or a defensive type fighter. He's an offensive type fighter. So he's stuck between following his nature, which is to attack, and knowing his limitations and being defensively aware and safety first. And that's a hard thing to do for a guy who so much of his success has been on physicality, athleticism, volume, and forward pressure. I feel like he's not as durable as he used to be. I feel like Benson Henderson is a comparable athlete to him. Maybe not the same way, but Benson's very strong. He's very agile. He's very flexible. He's got good explosion. He's got good cardio. I feel like Benson can still handle what Michael Chandler has to offer offensively. I don't know that Michael Chandler can handle what Benson Henderson has to offer offensively. I'm not saying he couldn't win a decision. I'm not saying he couldn't outposition him and out wrestle him, but I feel like physically he's vulnerable. I feel like if you can put a good 3 to 5 combination on him, you can put him on skates. He's shown a vulnerability to the calf kicks and the leg kicks against Primus, and Henderson's a much better kicker than him. Henderson's a much better grappler, and Henderson's a good enough wrestler that he can force scrambles and at least neutralize Chandler to some degree. So if Chandler gets hurt, he can't just bail out himself with the wrestling. He can't just bail out himself trying to grapple. He will be in just as much trouble as he would be on the feet. The question really comes down to how durable Henderson is, and if Henderson's still got the fire to push the pace the way he needs to push it, and extend those striking and grappling exchanges the way he needs to extend them to put Chandler in those positions where he can be taken. If he does, I feel like he's going to win him and stop him. If he doesn't, I feel like it could be another contested but ultimately clear win for Chandler. I'm going to say that Chandler has been damaged enough that Henderson's got what it takes to turn the corner and beat him this time, possibly by stoppage.
You have Henderson by stoppage?
Yeah, I think he can get him. I feel like Chandler's still been winning, but Chandler hasn't looked as good as he looked the year before and the year before and the year before. Henderson, I feel, is kind of, maybe he's not as great as he was in the UFC, but I still feel like he's been getting better. He's kind of found his stride. He's getting better. I don't see as much slippage with him. I don't see him just getting knocked around and bullied and ragdolled and kind of backed off by lesser athletes and lesser strikers. I've seen Primus frustrate Chandler twice. I saw Pitbull walk through Chandler. I haven't really seen Michael Chandler look particularly dominant. I can't remember the last fight he looks really just dominant in. Maybe I'm missing something. Do you remember the fight where he was just last fight he looked really dominant in?
So before I answer that question, because I need to look, got a question for you. $1 million question.
Yeah.
When's the last time Benson Henderson stopped someone? You can give me the person and the year.
I want to say it was the UFC. Who was it? I can't remember that guy's name. He moved it to welterweight. I don't know if he knocked him out or he submitted him. But it's probably like what, 6 years ago?
Yeah, Rustam Habalo. He submitted him at lightweight. That was in 2014.
It's not so much that I think that Chandler's just done, but I'm like, all the guys he's been fighting recently aren't really on Henderson's level as grappling or as wrestlers, as athletes, maybe not even as strikers. He's beaten a lot of good second tier guys, and he hasn't looked particularly dominant in doing so. I mean, he's looked good, he's looked strong, but he's not he's not on the tear he was when he first got in there. And to me, I feel like even in the first Henderson fight, it just took Henderson a little while to get going. But I felt like Henderson late in the fight was in a position where he could take over, and Chandler looked like he was starting to slow down. And I don't know, and I feel that 2-3 years later, the playing field has been even more leveled. I feel like Henderson's still where he was at that point physically, and I don't feel like Michael Chandler is where he was at that point physically anymore. I mean, Brent Primus, Sidney Outlaw, Brandon Girt.
I'm not going to argue you there because you're basically right about that. let's move on. Let's talk about UFC Fight Night 174. We have Derek Lewis and Alexei Oleinik in the main event here. People are talking about this fight as it's going to be something amazing. In my opinion, Derek Lewis is going to get taken down and submitted. But what do you see happening in Saturday's main event? Because I'm not allowing myself to get excited at all about this fight.
Well, that's what should happen because Derek Lewis, really, in my opinion, he's not a terrible fighter because he's functional in what he does and he plays to his strength. But skill-wise, he's just so suspect in so many ways. He can't really grapple. If you look at his striking, he's not really even a really great striker technically. Look at his wrestling. It's as far as technical. I mean, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. As far as a wrestler, technically, he's not great defensively, nor is he great offensively, nor is he great on the counter. He's a big, strong guy with great athleticism, who's got very good timing, and has the durability, fights on the counter, and has the durability and mental toughness to stay in fights long enough for a guy to make a mistake and for him to punish that guy. Olenek should outclass him, but almost everybody who's fought Derek Lewis should outclass him. And the thing with Derek Lewis is he's so easy to hit. He's so easy to get in bad position. He's so easy to kind of dictate pace to. The guys get comfortable. They get a little bit lax. They get a little bit sloppy. And he's a guy who only needs a shot or two to turn the fight. Now, if you look at him just on paper, Olenek should be the better conditioned fighter. He should be the busier fighter. He should be everything except the better athlete. Everything except the better athlete, better. He's smaller, he's quicker, he's in better shape. He's probably got the better grappling skills, got the better striking skills, got the better wrestling skills. I don't think he's beaten the best competition. Once again, neither is Derek Lewis. So on paper, I would say Olenek wins this because, once again, Lewis has been so inconsistent as far as his activity. You don't really know what he has left, but we always know that at any point he can turn a fight with a knockout, knee, kick, elbow, whatever. He can pull something out because he's always managed to find ways to hang into fights long enough to exploit whatever mistake his opponent's making. And Olenek being a guy who likes to be volume and busy and pressure, when you throw that much and you're that active and you look for finishes and you look to push the pace, you essentially put yourself in the line of fire to get stopped because you're constantly trying to inflict damage on your opponent, which exposes you to having damage inflicted on you. So that's really going to come to the question is Olenek's defense enough for him to fight a perfectly clean fight for 3 rounds or 5 rounds, or is Olenek going to make a mistake and get punished and stops? When you have that kind of power Lewis has, you land 1 or 2 shots, that essentially wins you any round you're in. You know, you land 1 or 2 shots that are busting somebody up, you win the round off damage. So he doesn't have to knock you out. He just has to land enough shots to make you stumble, drop you, or bust you up to where the judges are like, yeah, this guy's taking him down, but this guy's not submitting him. And every time he touches this guy's stumbling or getting cut or getting bruised up. So we'll just give him the win based off that, like they did when he beat Roy Nelson. So it's on paper, it should be Olenek. I'd probably still go Olenek because Lewis hasn't been particularly active and he's had health problems. But I won't be shocked if he wins by another Hail Mary shot and finishes him. That seems to be his specialty.
Do you think the winner of this fight puts himself in a position for a eventual title shot?
I can't imagine so. I mean, Derek Lewis. I mean, he's got to win over Ngannou. I don't. If DC wins, I don't know why DC's already beat him. I can't imagine Stipe would try to fight him. I mean, I don't know that he brings enough money to the table. I guess whoever wins gets moved up. Whoever wins gets moved up regardless. But neither guy has been on a hot streak, and neither guy's such a big draw that I can guarantee that they're going to be the next in line for a title fight. I still feel Ngannou's next for whoever wins the DC or Stipe fight. And I guess you could do Ngannou Lewis if one of them drops the title and they have an interim match. But that first fight was so bad. I don't know that anybody would want to pay for that again. You know, regardless of who won, I don't think anybody wants to see that fight again. So I don't think either one of them is. I think whoever's there is going to be behind Ngannou, and who's the guy who did Blades? I think both of them are behind Ngannou and Blades. They put fights together, they put wins together. Lewis hasn't really recently. And Olenek beat Maurice Green and Fabricio Verdum. Verdum's a good win, but Verdum hasn't looked the same in years, and I don't think 2 wins is enough to justify him getting a title shot. And as far as Lewis, I think he's got to win at least 2, maybe 3 fights where he's legitimately able to call anybody out for a title fight.
I don't disagree with you there at all, sir. At all. Is there anything else that stands out on this card to you? We have a pretty interesting co-main event where Omari Akhmedov is fighting Chris Weidman. Like, what's Chris Weidman's going to show up?
I don't. Even when it's like when people say what Chris Weidman's going to show up, I don't really know what to say because I feel like the same Chris Weidman shows up. Ever since he had that fight with Luke Rockhold, he's still a guy who's a very good wrestler. He's still a guy who's a very good grappler. He's just a guy whose ability to absorb punishment and recover from punishment is essentially non-existent. I mean, Kelvin Gastelum, who's not a big hitter, had him rocked. Rockhold beat him within an inch of his life. Yo Romero damn near killed him. And then you had who's the other guy who's in Bellator now? I can't think of the other guy, but he's the Bellator champion right now. Or he was the Bellator champion. He lost it to Raphael and Schwan. But he's been stopped time after time after time. So if he can get you in grappling exchanges, get his hands on you, wrestle you, and make it a extended grappling or extended wrestling exchange, he's still good. He's still long. He's still strong. He's still agile. He's still got great timing, great conditioning, great positioning. But it seems his ability to hang in or to recover from any sort of exchanges on the feet is slim to none. I mean, Kelvin Gastelum almost had him dead to right. It's just he was able to force the grappling exchange and submit him. And I feel like he could do the same with this guy. But even to grapple, you have to be able to get in range. You have to be able to set it up. And when you have literally almost no margin for error as far as the punishment you can take, it makes it almost impossible to get to the spots you need to. It makes it almost impossible for you to consistently, aggressively pressure and work for takedowns because at some point you're going to get reversed and have to take some punishment. At some point you're going to get sprawled and have to take some punishment. At some point you're going to push somebody up against the cage, they're going to spin you, and they're going to put punishment on you. And if Weidman can't take any damage at all, I don't know how he beats anybody unless he just essentially can walk through him, and I don't know that he can just walk through this guy, whether it's on the ground or not. What about you? How do you see it?
I see Chris Weidman getting finished, and I don't think it's going to be pretty in any way, shape, or form. Is he on a win streak or not? Let me look real quick. Because I can't remember the last time he won.
No, he got knocked out of light heavyweight last fight, if I remember correctly.
Oh, he's on a 2-fight losing streak. He lost to Dominic Reyes and Jacare. I think he gets finished, man. He's 1-5 in his last 6. All 5 of those losses were by finish.
Yeah, if he can just, I mean, to be fair, in all those fights, he was able to get the fight to the ground and have some success there. But the thing about it is now he's at the point where it's desperation. If he can't keep you on the ground, it's like he just can't take any punishment at all. And I don't know how you win fights when literally any one punch can knock you out or stun you. I mean, I know in combat sports they say any punch can finish you, but literally when any punch can finish you, how do you come up with an effective game plan for that? There's almost no way you're gonna consistently through a 3-round fight not get touched in any aspect, unless you just dominate a guy. And even if you do, how long can you go through that far? If he wins this fight, he just takes him down and beats him up and submits him. That's not going to prove anything to me. I won't believe in him until I start seeing him take punishment. Until I start seeing him, to take some abuse and work his way through it, and then get to where he needs to be at. Because the question isn't his grappling or his wrestling. This question is his ability to absorb and recover from punishment. Because if you're not any sort of threat on the feet, how good can you be as a wrestler?
I mean, that's a huge question here because he has to fight this fight and not get his chin touched. And there's no way that doesn't happen at this point in time in his career.
Especially when you can't finish him. Like when a guy's chin is that suspect, you'll do anything to get a shot at it. You'll take some chances you shouldn't even take because he can't take it. It's like I don't know that you can when your chin's that bad, I don't know that you can game plan or strategize around it. And it seems they're trying to give him the easiest matchup possible to win this. And if he beats this guy, maybe they have him put it against Shabazian, but Shabazian's real quick and explosive. He can catch him early in a fight. I don't know. I tend to agree with you. I just don't think he has it anymore. And even if he beats this guy, it's not going to make me feel good about seeing Chris Weidman fight still.
I mean, I think if he fights Shabazian, he gets finished there too as well.
I mean, maybe if I'm Derek Brunson and Chris Weidman wins this fight, I call out for Chris Brunson. Chris Weidman, he's a name. I mean, he's on a losing streak, but he's still a name. And maybe I try to get him out of there and further build my momentum. I just feel bad because at one point Chris Weidman was considered the future of the division. I never considered him that, and I went on 2 years ago. I went on 2 or 3 years ago. I went on a long rant about how him and Luke Rocco were about to be exposed, and I didn't say that in a negative manner. I don't dislike him. I just felt that he had clear limitations in his fighting style, and once he started fighting people his age, he was going to start losing, which he did. I just never thought he would collapse like this. I mean, I figured he'd be a win some, lose some, but lose win one out of his last 6. I never thought Chris Weidman would fall that far. I mean, right now Anderson Silva is the better fighter than Chris Weidman. In fact, if I'm Anderson Silva, when I come back, I want to fight Chris Weidman and close that trilogy out on a win.
True that, sir. We have only one listener question today. It's a rather quiet night, even though a lot of stuff is going on today. And it's in reference to Conor McGregor. So he is back to his Twitter fingers type of deal, talking about retiring, talking about I accept, hinting towards all this shit. Dana White went on record saying that he doesn't think McGregor will fight in 2020. So yes or no, and why? Do you think Conor fights this year?
I don't know who I read this on Twitter for, but somebody on Twitter was saying right now with the pandemic, you can't have people, attend fights. And even though you would get a huge rating with Conor, when Conor fights, not only do you get a huge rating, you get sellout, gates that break records. And they were saying, that they didn't think the UFC would let Conor McGregor fight until they were starting able to have fans in there so they could pretty much double dip the live gate as well as the pay-per-views. And at first I thought that was a little crazy, but then I started thinking about it. I was like, well, yeah, I mean, Conor's guaranteed to fill it up. You get a 30,000 place or a 50,000 seat stadium, Conor will fill that up. And $50,000, $50,000 seat stadium, that's a big gate. We're talking, 17, 18, 19, 20, $25 million. And pay-per-view sales it'll clearly break $1 million, maybe even break $2 million, depending on who you have him fighting against. It'll break $1 million even if you just have him fighting at nobody. I don't know that you want to give that kind of money. I mean, he'd get you a big pay-per-view number right now, but you get that pay-per-view number and the live gate if you wait 6 to 8 months and give him some time to work on what he's doing, address some holes in his game or strengthen some areas in his game, and kind of build up a demand for him to come back. So I don't think he's going to fight either. I don't think the matchup exists where they'd want it right now. I mean, if Gaethje beats Khabib, then the earliest they could fight is December, maybe January, depending on who wins. I don't think Khabib would fight Conor again, but if Justin beats him, I could see Justin fighting him in January, maybe the same thing as Super Bowl weekend like they usually do, and that would be a huge fight. But outside of that, I don't know who else they put him in with where they would think it's worth the loss they take on that live gate. I would like to see him fight like an Anthony Pettis or somebody that still does 1 million buys, but once again, you missed it on that live gate. And that's a pretty big sum of money for a guy who's consistently been known to sell out stadiums before. So I don't think they make that fight. I think they really do wait until January, December before they hold another fight for Conor McGregor so that they can double dip on that payday for him.
I can agree with that. I don't think he fights this year for a wealth of reasons. And I think one of the big reasons is because they're trying to get people to turn around in these quick situation fights. I think he holds out because he'll ask for some a ridiculous amount of money that they can afford, but they don't want to kowtow to. So I can agree with you.
Something I wanted to ask you about? Have you heard the rumors about Jessica Andrade moving up to flyweight?
I have not. Didn't she just get? She's fighting. No, she's fighting Jessica I next.
Isn't Jessica I at flyweight? Because
She is. Yep.
yeah, so they're having moved up. I really think this might work for her. I was surprised she didn't do this after her loss to the title fight. I didn't understand her going back down in weight. I mean, it's still a weight class where she's probably a better athlete than almost 90% of the people in the division. And I don't know who would actually stop her on her way to on her way to a title shot against Valentina Shivchenko. Um, I know the size advantage won't be as great, but I mean, if you got Cynthia Calvillo kind of bullying people and Jennifer Maia bullying people, I don't know what Jessica Andrade does when she gets her hands on somebody in that division. I actually am a big fan of this. I don't know who I would pick to beat her, and if she wins 2 or 3 fights, she's essentially in the title fight right then. And I don't know 2 or 3 people in the division who I say beat her right now.
Do you think she can win a belt at 125?
Oh no, her whole style is pressure and volume physicality. I feel like her chin's been cracked a little bit. I feel like she's there to be hit. And the biggest advantage she had against Rose was Rose's inability to really absorb punishment and her lack of physicality against a certain kind of athlete. Valentina does not have those problems. She can't just bully her. She hits her with a best shot. Valentina's not going to fold. She puts her hands on her. I'm not saying she can't move Valentina or take her down or back her up, but she's not ragdolling her, and she's not going to wear her out in the same fashion that she wore out almost everybody ever she fought, from Angela Hill to Rose Namajunas to Claudia Gadelha. Valentina has the physical strength. She has the athleticism. More importantly, she has the cardio to fight at the pace that Jessica Andrade wants to fight at. The question, I think she stops Andrade within 2 rounds, but it'd be an exciting fight because Andrade is just going to sell out and try to impose her will on her. And Andrade's got the physicality and athleticism to put her in some bad spots and to land some shots and to get her attention in a way that Jessica I, Kevin Shukagan, and even Jennifer Maia aren't going to be able to.
Interesting thoughts there, sir. Interesting thoughts. So why don't you let everybody know what you're working on, man? I saw your Captain America piece come back up in my feed today. What else are you working on?
I'm going over some ideas. Sometimes I'm thinking about looking over some live action fights from shows and maybe reviewing some of them and kind of breaking them down. Like, in MMA or boxing, somebody will review an old fight, kind of break it down, show you what they're doing, techniques, where the fight turned. Think about doing something like that similarly for comic book fights. Maybe on Black Lightning, you had a couple, Arrow, even some of the Marvel movies, and just revisiting it, breaking down the combatants and breaking down what happened in that fight again, kind of a closer look for fans of comic books or fans of martial arts who like to see their styles or their skills exhibited in comic book live action movies or TV shows.
True, true. I am, doing my usual, covering MMA, covering pro wrestling. Have you been watching any basketball?
Yeah, I mean, part of the job, crazy job now, but yeah, I watch a fair amount. I spend a fair amount. It's either combat sports stuff or basketball. That's pretty much the majority of my day.
What are you liking about the bubble and how they're doing everything down here?
To me, it's like, I mean, I spent a lot of my time at AAU tournaments the last 3 or 4 years. Actually, last six years, if we're being honest. So it's kind of fun because it's like being at a big AAU tournament. You just, especially when you don't have a lot of the crowds in there. So you're like an empty gym and you're just watching people play ball and trying to compete. And it's not as emotional swings and exciting as fans there, because it's like in the bubble, it's like watching a really good movie at home by yourself. Like there's a certain quietness and appreciation you can have for the movie because it's just you. But also sometimes when you see a really funny movie or a movie that has a lot of dramatic swings, I don't know about you, but sometimes I ask myself, I'm like, man, I wish I would have saw this movie in a crowd. Like I saw The Dark Knight in a movie theater. I'm so glad I did because it just made the experience that much better. But it's same thing with Avengers Endgame or Infinity War. But there's been some movies I've seen and I saw them like at home and I'm like, man, I really wish I would have I saw Civil War at home. I really wish I would have saw this in a movie theater. It would have been really cool to have that energy and that the excitement and the pressure that comes from having people actively engaged in it. So when you see these games, it's people just playing pure basketball at the purest of levels for the purest of reasons. but sometimes you miss some of the swings and the ebbs and the flows and the excitement that comes with the crowd. 50,000 people booing against somebody who's got to hit a clutch free throw, or a guy hitting a tough shot and silencing a crowd of 50,000 people. There's something about that resonates with you. But I like the purity of it. I like the fact that it's pretty much just skills on skills and pure competition, which is, as a person who trains kids, that's pretty much what I'm here for.
That's what's up, man. I've really been enjoying it as well too. I'm watching the game right now, actually, as we end this show. So
wait. One more thing I want to touch on. It's actually a boxing thing, but I wanted to touch on it here.
Go ahead.
We got Vasily Lomachenko supposed to be fighting Teofimo Lopez, and Lopez seems to be kind of being iffy about the fight because he wants more money. And while I'm always a fan of fighters getting paid the money they deserve and having sponsorship opportunities and opportunities to increase their brand and pay for their families, because it is a dangerous way to make a living, I have this rule when you're a fighter, and I've told other fighters I've worked with about this. You can't call a fighter out as a man being scared of you, ducking you, afraid to take this whooping, challenge his pride, challenge his skill, challenge his competitiveness as an athlete. And then when that person accepts the fight, start talking money. I understand it's about money. I understand it's prize fighting. But when you call that person out in the newspaper and after your fight and then your press conference, it wasn't about money. It was about, he's afraid of me, he's ducking me, he's old, he's ready to be taken, I'm here to be the king. And as soon as that opportunity comes, you start talking about, well, I need to get paid and it's a big fight and I need to get my money's worth. Yeah, you do. But you should have had that talk before. You don't get to talk tough and act like, it's the same thing I tell MMA guys. I'm a warrior. I do this for free. I'm prepared to die in there. Well, you're prepared to die in there. Why are you trying to negotiate more money? Because the warrior doesn't have that option. He just got to fight. He doesn't get to dictate those terms. So while I understand what he's doing, to me it's a bad look because if this fight falls through, you're the one who's been campaigning for it. You're the one who's been demanding it. You're the guy who's been talking about this other guy for years. And now you have him. He signed the contract. He's ready to go. And now you're talking about, well, I need to get more money. And as a fighter, you do. But sometimes you got to take the short money to take the next step. Even Floyd Mayweather took short money and let Oscar De La Hoya dictate terms because he knew that fighting Oscar De La Hoya was going to move him to a different echelon and open up all these other opportunities. He's a businessman and he's a fighter. He took on a challenge, but he understood what that challenge would do for him. Lopez seems to want the best of both worlds. And if that's what he's doing, I think it's going to backfire on him, whether he gets the fight or later or not. Now's the time to get it. You demanded it. You're getting offered it. Take what it is, and you're so sure you can win. Beat the guy, get the rematch, then you dictate the terms. You demand how much money you're getting. You're in control from that point on. But you can't call someone out as a man and then say, well, let's talk about numbers. Talk about numbers before, be a businessman or be a fighter, but don't pick and choose when you're going to make these stands because it makes you look suspect to me.
That is a hell of a stance there, man. Are there any fights you're looking forward to? There was that Showtime. I saw that the opening fight on Showtime was carded last weekend, where dude caught that nasty lead uppercut that put him out.
Oh yeah, that guy should be thrown in jail for that punch. The hard thing about boxing is right now, I'm looking forward to Errol Spence, Danny Garcia, and the reason, and a lot of boxers are not wanting to take pay cuts because of the pandemic. You're not going to get the money you're used to taking. They used to be fighting these guys who were 50-50 fighters or people nobody knew, and they would get $2 million, $3 million, $4 million to fight those guys. But with the pandemic and how other people are out of business and can't afford pay-per-views and can't afford trips to these places, for you to get that same kind of money, you're going to have to fight a better class of opponent. Now, a lot of these guys were like, well, if I got $5 million to fight Rod Salka, I should get $10 million to fight a guy who's halfway decent. And that's not the way it's going to be anymore. You want $10 million, you're going to have to start fighting guys who we recognize and we acknowledge as top name fighters. Guys like Ryan Garcia or Teofimo Lopez, they want top money. We've got to see you perform at the highest level. And these guys are used to getting paid very well and used to getting the extra bonuses from the promotions and from fans. But that's not going to be the case anymore. People don't have a lot of disposable income. So if you want me to part from my money that I need and I don't have a lot of, then I got to know that if you not get a quick knockout over a guy who's a top guy in your division or a pound for pound guy, I'm okay with that. But watching you beat up on a guy who's 11-11, that doesn't do it for me anymore. And a lot of people just not just aren't going to tolerate it and support it, the economy won't. So these guys either got to start taking pay cuts, or they got to start facing tough opposition. In the case of Errol Spence, he's facing Danny Garcia, who's a former world champion, still a top 3, top 4 welterweight, and Danny Garcia is fighting Errol Spence, who everybody who works for Al Heyman or in the PBC has been trying to avoid. Only fought when they had to fight him. So that's 2 high-level welterweights who are going to be fighting for a world championship. That's a fight that will get you paid, and people won't feel bad about you getting paid. These other guys who are trying to fight some journeyman guy or some guy who's damaged goods, who might make them go some rounds, that's not going to cut it anymore. People want to see real challenges. You want to get paid real money? I want to see you in there with a real threat. If there's not a threat of you getting knocked out or beaten or losing that undefeated record, I ain't paying for it. And these guys are going to have to start readjusting to that. If they don't want to adjust, they won't be fighting because people are not going to pay to see them beat up on somebody who's outclassed anymore.
Good stuff, man. We gotta continue to build our content, what we're talking about here. So maybe we have a boxing show coming up in the future or something like that. We'll pitch that idea around. But with that in mind, we're gonna go ahead and close out. Thank you for joining me today, sir. A little bit later than usual, but the Dana White Contender Series was on, so we'll be back next week around the same time. And
just another job for you to work, man. What's that, 15 now, or is it 17?
Just about. Who knows?
We'll be back next week.
Everybody have a great weekend. Thank you for listening to the show and have fun watching the fights.
Thank you, sir. Take it easy.